Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, August 9th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. We have some technical issues today, perhaps suggesting that this might be a good time for us to take a little break, and we are, in fact, absent horrible, nightmarish world events next week, going to be doing pre-taped special podcasts from a Monday through Thursday. So they're pretty great. We make some recommendations about great speeches, great memoirs, great science fiction, some other things. So that will be a next week's podcast entertainment, assuming the world doesn't force us, as it did a couple of weeks ago, to end that plan and come back live to talk about how everything was going to hell in a handbasket. And by us, I mean executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
I don't even know if I said us. I might have said we or something. But anyway, Washington commentary columnist Matthew Conte, slightly technically challenged today. He's on his phone. He may sound a little tinny, but, you know, better that than nothing is what I say. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John. And I wouldn't say I'm technically challenged. I was able to log on to Zoom. It's just that I may sound like I'm 2 leagues underwater because of both the flooding here in D.C. And I'm on my earpods. So.
And speaking of the flooding, we have another participant in the podcast whose home might be under electromagnetic pulse attack from the storm. Some flickering lights, things like that. Perhaps he'll cut out and we're going to lose him. But until we do, here he is, senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John. Happy to be here for whatever amount of time I'm here. The lights have stopped flickering, so let's...
Okay, so we can talk raw, naked, ridiculous, superficial politics, or we can talk about a potential breakthrough moment in the Middle East, or we can talk about both. What do we want to start with? Let's start with Trump, just because that's life. So Trump gave about an hour and a half press conference yesterday, 2:00 in the afternoon. I watched it. Two things. One, he looked really good. Something's happened to his makeup, and I have this new theory. I'm now going to float irresponsibly, but it's Trump, so why can't I? That one of the reasons that he has been out of sight for a while is that he did a little plastic surgery touching up, because he looked about 5 years younger than he did the last time I saw him really close up. And his makeup has changed. He looked normal, and I was, as it happens, last night with in the presence of a major American entertainer who also said to me, I thought he looked really good. And this is not a Trump fan. Like, I thought in the press conference he looked really good, and this is somebody who knows about image and, you know, what people are supposed to look like. And so that was thing number one. So he looked good, but I thought he sounded crazy and terrible. And then I'm reliably informed as it's over from people that I trust, who are not Trumpers, in fact, Democrats, that, look, he had this press conference. He wanted to get a couple of things across. One was that he would debate. Second is that he would talk to reporters. And third, that he was willing to prosecute a line of attack against Kamala Harris about her being a liberal and was ready to get on the road. And he did all three. I think he did not do the third competently. In fact, I think he did it in a way that should be very unnerving to people who think that this is the only path to his victory. But I could be wrong. I'm now pretty sure I was wrong when I said I thought J.D. Vance would be knocked off the ticket. I think that's obviously probably not going to happen, because probably the Trump people think that he's a good counter to Tim Walz on the military stuff. Okay, so that's my quick take. Matt, what do you got?
My take basically lines up with yours, John. I think that the big news out of the press conference was Trump's agreement to debate Kamala Harris on September 10th. That is the pre-agreed ABC debate, and Trump had basically given mixed messages about whether he would participate. We now know he will participate. There will be at least one Trump-Harris debate. I think the second item that you mentioned is very important. Trump stood there in the great room of Mar-a-Lago and answered questions from the press for over an hour. Kamala Harris has yet to give an extended interview or press conference. After Trump spoke yesterday afternoon, Harris did approach reporters on the tarmac and answered a couple of questions very briefly.
71 seconds.
Yeah, 71 seconds.
71 seconds of a gaggle. What's called a gaggle.
When I said very, I meant very, very briefly. And out of that came the news. It wasn't really even news. She said that she's talking to her team and she would like to give an interview by the end of the month. So we have that to look forward to, America. By August 31st, 2 weeks from now, maybe we'll have an interview with Kamala Harris.
With Tim Walz.
Well, did she say Tim Walz?
She didn't say it, but the campaign, backstopped it. Yeah.
Right. There's another report that they were planning some type of joint interview. On the third point about Trump's performance, I'd say a couple things. I mean, one is, we have to stop applying the traditional canons of political performance to Donald Trump. He's been here for now almost a decade. What we think of as a good performance here in Washington, D.C. is often not what the people view as a good performance. And sometimes they pick up the voters things that DC misses, or they don't care about the weird digressions and extended monologues. However, I will admit that he seemed tired. I think he seemed pretty tired. And he didn't quite return to the core arguments, painting Harris as an extremist again and again and again. He said it at times, but he often got sidetracked, as we all know. People are talking about how he compared the crowd size on January 6th to the crowd at the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech in 1963. So there are many digressions like that. He talked about how nice the room was where he was speaking. I do think, though, at the end of the day, he did what he was supposed to do. And now the question is, will it have any effect beyond the past 12 hours?
Okay, can I bite back at this? Because
Sure.
I'm trying very hard throughout watching these two candidates for whom I have very little sympathy or taste to try to see clearly, not through my own eyes and prejudices. And I'm not assuming that anybody outside of 4 or 5 million people in the country watched any or all of a mid-afternoon press conference that was so incompetently staged. And this is an important side point. So he did this press conference. It didn't occur to the Trump team that they needed to have hand mics to give to the reporters whom he was going to call on so that you could hear their questions. So you sat there guessing at what question he was answering. That wasn't good for him. It did not make him seem like he was focused or on point. It made it worse. And it made him seem more digressive and kind of a little out of it. Maybe he was answering those questions directly. I still don't know because I haven't looked at the transcript. But it was a jar. This happens sometimes, in like local events when you watch a local press conference or something like that with a cop when they're doing a briefing about a murder or something like that, and they just don't have the PR knowledge to know. They need to make sure that the questioners can be heard by the camera and by the audience. This is a major presidential campaign. It's his third run for president. That team has absolutely no excuse for not knowing that if they're in a big room where he himself was having trouble hearing what the reporters were saying, that the reporters needed to be audible to the nation to whom he was speaking. Okay, but that's a side point. But trying to look at what he was saying, what I thought was that maybe you could clip it into things that were coherent, but that in no way was he coherent in the sense that he never introduces his priors or introduces the precedents so he thinks what he's talking about. And he starts saying, it's like I was talking to Bill. Bill said that was 72. And you know what? He's got a point there. But then Joe told me another thing, and you don't know who Bill is, you don't know who Joe is, you don't know what the year is, you don't know what the number is, and you don't know what he's talking about. And he shows that, yes, he's not the classic communicator ever and has his own unique style, but his own unique style can come across well or come across badly. I think we would all agree that it did not come across well in the convention speech, and that he blew an opportunity in the convention speech, maybe blew, as he would say, the biggest opportunity in the history of the United States of America to refocus and make himself a higher and grander figure than he is. But he doesn't want to be the person from that speech when he is losing altitude and Kamala Harris is gaining altitude. That would be my objection. Abe?
I have actually, unlike you, John, I think I have a very easy time sort of taking things from Trump speeches, finding what he's done well in a given speech, even no matter how bonkers it is. I've gotten very used to that. I never think in terms of him as sounding crazy or not. And I'm more often than not, I am at least entertained by a Trump speech. I will say, therefore, that both yesterday, I didn't last as long as John watching that because I got extremely bored. Yesterday and at the convention, I think he failed to entertain me. And there's something sort of consistent about that in this sort of like newer iteration of Trump here. And I don't think that's intentional. Look, not that I'm his target anyway, but I think he wants to be broadly entertaining and engaging, and he wasn't that to me either yesterday or at the convention.
So he's authentic. And there is a way in which the entire thing of him is his authenticity, including the fact that he doesn't know when to, he can't focus and he bounces around and he has this kind of like severe ADD quality to his public presentation. And that's him, and that's who he is, and that's who he's going to be. And maybe that's a contrast with Kamala, who is trying to be nothing. But we know when she tries to be something, often comes across as false, phony, fake, staged, whatever. But he's got a different challenge here. He's got a surging rival.
Yeah,
he's never had it. Go ahead. Yeah,
I have a theory about his challenge that I kind of wrote about in my column today at the Free Beacon. I think what's happened is, quite unexpectedly, we went from a two-incumbent race where we had the first time since 1892 that both major parties nominated presidents, one sitting president, the other his predecessor, to now an open race featuring a former president and an incumbent vice president. And what's unique about this open race that is developing is that the former president, because he's so well known, because opinions about him are so fixed, because he has soaked up so much of the world's attention for the last decade, he functions as the incumbent. And Harris, despite being the sitting vice president, has assumed this mantle of freshness, novelty, and change. And so Trump's challenge, it seems to me, in the 80-some days remaining, is he has to wrest the mantle of change back from Harris. He has to become the challenger who is traditionally favored in an open race. Right now, he seems like he's the incumbent. He seems like he's the person who's fixed in place, and he seems a little bit stale.
And she's been playing that pretty well by saying, on day one, we're going to do what's right to fix the economy. On day one, we're going to do, but what day is this of the Harris administration? Right? 1,000 something? 1,000 and 1,100, whatever it is. So she's been able to do that without any sort of real pushback from the Trump campaign, he's got to focus on that. And I think connected to Matt's theory is something that I've been thinking about, which is that Trump and we sort of got into this a bit at the convention and before, when we talked about Trump kind of having this sense of like, I rest my case, I think we called it at the time. I think that Trump is his 2016 campaign gets compared a lot to Obama's 2008 campaign, not because they're similar people, but because it was this sort of out of nowhere, exciting realignment, vibes, you could say, like all this stuff. I don't think that he's a substantive enough politician. That's not where his strengths lie anyway. That to run another open presidential election is highly unusual in this situation, and he's not really prepared for it, which is that you get elected president and then you run for re-election. He's doing something very unusual. Yeah. Excuse me, very unusual, which is he's gone back to having to be the guy to challenge the sitting administration and to challenge the people in office the way he was in 2016. And there's no more newness. You can't be that candidate again. The advantage you have once you become president is the advantage of incumbency. And I think that he's in a really tough position now of not really knowing how to convert that back into some kind of newness and the new thing. There's just no way for him to be that. And he's also, because he isn't president right now, so this isn't technically his re-election campaign, he's also not running on his own accomplishments. He can't say, you don't change horses midstream. And he also can't say, I'm the new thing. I guess that's the sort of double.
I might challenge that last part, Seth, which simply because he does have tools to go into this campaign with. Even in these surveys showing the Harris surge, people still rate the economy as important. People still rate the border as very important. And Trump continues to benefit from both of those issues. People trust him more than they trust Harris. It's just that with the surge of enthusiasm, Harris has shrank the margin between the two candidates, and that's given her a boost. So earlier this year, you had a lot of signage at Trump rallies saying better off with Trump. And it was a, straight on comparison between the Trump record on these issues and the Biden record on these issues. If he has a way to win, I think it is going back to saying the economy was better under me, the border was secure under me, the world was not as much a mess as it is today when I was president. Doubling down on those issue strengths, I think, is what makes this race still competitive and why Trump still does have a chance here on August 9th.
I think he has more than a chance. I mean, I do think the election remains a jump ball. Like, she's had three of the best just like he had four of the best political weeks, largely because of Biden's infirmities, but he had like four of the best political weeks we've ever seen before the convention. And she has had three of the best political weeks we've ever seen, period. And she's up 4 or 5. I mean, she's closed his advantage, which is important, but she hasn't jumped ahead 12 points. Like, the person who jumped into a race, it's not comparable to Kamala, but the person that jumped into a race the last time and upset a race and changed the trajectory of everything was Ross Perot in 1992. And Ross Perot, after 6 weeks, when he got into the race, and then after 6 weeks, was polling in the high 20s from zero. So it's not like she couldn't have jumped to 55% or something like that. The underlying dynamic of ideological and partisan parity in the country remains exactly where it was. So Alex Castellanos, the old, Republican hand, media guy, commercial maker, all of that, said something interesting the other day, which is like, any conventional Republican could run this race against Harris and Walz with his eyes closed. It's a total 40-year, they're too liberal. Here's how. This. Social issues here. Guns here. Foreign policy here. Taxes here. Border here. Crime, disorder. Like a county sheriff candidate who had been paying the slightest attention could have run this playbook. It is the irony of 2024 that the Republicans find themselves with a candidate who may be the only candidate, major political candidate in the Republican Party in the last 40 years, for whom that is a discomfiting or unfamiliar playbook, or can't quite get the playbook memorized in his head. He knows it. He kept invoking it during this press conference and kept coming back to it. And then he slides off and he goes to his own favorite topics. Brian Kemp, how bad he was, the mistreatment of the January 6th rioters, crowd size, all the old greatest hits that are like, he goes to his comfort island because he's got to talk about things that don't suit him in some fashion. And that's a unique problem, because it feels to me, as I think you're saying, Matt, if he could be a conventional Republican for 2 months, he could put her away.
Well, and the Brian Kemp thing is really important, because the Brian Kemp thing is, remember, he has blown successive elections in Georgia now. There are currently 2 Democratic senators from the state of Georgia. One of those senators lost the election, but Jon Ossoff was able to, by 1/10
of a percentage point. Yeah, that's right.
Right, but he was able to hold Purdue under 50% by just barely, and so he got a runoff. So, you know, in a classic sense, that was a very clear blown election, because Purdue actually won, and then they reran the election, and Ossoff won. And he has been attacking Georgia and its popular governor and its effective governor. By the way, Brian Kemp is the sort of guy who, in a normal world, in a normal situation in which we don't have an ex-president running again, you would think, why aren't you running? Right? If there was a smoke-filled room, a lot of people would be saying, hey, Brian Kemp won when these MAGA guys lost in his own state. Right. He beat Stacey Abrams, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is that it's not just attacking his own people or a section of his own party. He keeps going after a state that he can't lose. And the state finally seems to have gone back to a sort of normal, if not revert to the mean, that at least put Republicans up by a few points going into it. And he's flirting with a kind of disaster. It was like watching the USA men's basketball team yesterday against Serbia. Right. It's like, you can just right the ship and win if you just start paying attention now. But the Georgia thing is like, what's he going to do? He's going to start giving away states?
It's worse than that, because it wasn't just that Ossoff got a second run at David Perdue and took the seat in the 2 runoff election at the beginning of 2021. It was that Raphael Warnock won his Senate seat in 2022 because Trump intervened again in Georgia and got a psychopathic, multiple personality idiot football player in the race whom Warnock slaughtered. Like, Warnock beat Herschel Walker by 9 or something like that, and Kemp by 5, and Kemp won by 9. Like, it's Trump's interventions in Georgia have been catastrophic, and it's like, don't talk about Georgia. Like, don't even. And then he said the weirdest thing that makes me concerned, if I were concerned, which I'm not really, but about whom he listens to. Because he likes, like everybody, like the Wicked Witch in the musical The Wiz, "Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News" is her big song, and you don't want to be the person who brings Trump bad news. And he said You know how I know that Georgia was stolen? Because I ran up huge margins in Alabama and Mississippi. And what states are more comparable than Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia? That is a psychotic thing to say. Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia have electorally nothing in common, as evinced by the fact that Georgia has 2 Democratic senators, and they don't. And Georgia has a gigantic metropolitan area in the middle of it that is blue, and neither Mississippi nor Alabama has anything remotely like that. And so if this is the kind of political advice that he gets, where people tell him nonsense about why he should continue thinking what he's thinking, it's a little unnerving. That
I got to say that
okay.
that one sounds like it came straight from his own thinking. I don't know that anyone told him that.
You mean he looked at a map
someone
and
should
said,
tell him the name of the Harris's running mate, because he never. I've watched the whole thing. I'm pretty sure I never heard him say the name Tim Walz. He kept saying Harris and her new friend, her new pal.
Okay, well okay, but that's an important.
Yeah.
Okay, that now I got to bring this up because we got to want to mention this. He's 70. He's now the 78-year-old man in the race. She's 59. He's 78. Right. I think he forgot Tim Walz's name. So let's just stand back for a minute and say he's 78. I go up on words. I'm not criticizing nobody, but you don't want to be the person in this race that invokes Biden after Biden's out of the race for being too old. And if he's at a press conference and he goes up on the name of the, new political star in America,
right?
And he did it a couple of times. It wasn't what there were somebody else he was like, I can't get the name, but it's that guy who is so da 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 like that.
Yeah, well, he didn't look. Yeah. I mean, I found it very amusing. I agree. Yeah. It was worrisome, but it wasn't quite Biden.
No,
struggling to remember the name of his defense secretary and calling him the black man, or Biden at the debate struggling to say a complete sentence and ending with beat Medicare, but it was kind of amusing. I think that he clearly did just forget who this guy was, and he called her new pal.
I actually think he should. What's weird is that I agree with you that he forgot it and it was unintentional, but I actually think he should do that. I actually think he should. The campaign should not talk about Walz except when there's stories that sort of bring out something that's easy to hit. I think it's actually a good move to just be like, listen, she's the incumbent. This is her administration. Who cares about Tim Walz? This is the Biden-Harris administration. Right. The Harris-Biden administration. It's the Harris-Biden record, et cetera, et cetera. And he would actually benefit if he would be disciplined in framing it that way instead of conveniently forgetting a name. Yeah. So I don't know what we can expect in the future.
Okay,
he could learn something from himself.
Abe, the flipped script, the script flipping, which is one of the reasons that Democrats are so gleeful about where things are right now, is they wanted people to be hitting Trump the way she's hitting Trump or the way the campaign is hitting Trump since 2016. They want to score on crowd size because he's not so about crowd size. So they want to have 30,000 people in a hangar so they can go, yeah, we have 30,000 people in a hangar, because they know that it gets under Trump's skin. And partisan Democrats, love the idea that they are getting to Trump. It is catnip to them. It is heroin to them. And similarly, I think he is building up, or she could build up, a script flip in these debates. What was the coup de grace moment for Trump with Biden on June 27th? It's when Biden started saying the thing about beating Medicare, and then Trump said, I have no idea what he just said there, and I don't think he does either. That was the moment that Biden's presidency, or hopes for a second term, ended, in my view. Said something clipped, simple, 8 words or whatever it was, and he was done, right? If Trump does some of the stuff that he did yesterday, Harris can say, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what the hell you just said. maybe you could be a little clearer, because it's been 8 years. What the hell are you talking about? That kind of thing. Now, and that again, not only would it make Democrats gleeful, which is not really, it's necessary for her to maintain Democratic enthusiasm till November. So she needs to keep feeding that. But she's probably gotten that mostly in the bag. This question of whether she can plant doubts about Trump's abilities to serve another term is vital to her chances, in my view.
I'll say a few things about this. One, I think the Democrats and the Harris campaign, they're really playing him like a violin right now. It's not just that the base is giddy because they're getting to him. They're getting to him, and it's rattling. I mean, he seems rattled. He seems very much off his game. If he brings the sort of stream of consciousness, free-floating version of himself into that debate, and she were to take the tack, John, that you described, which is interesting, it would be effective, except for the fact that I have no doubt that she can go toe-to-toe with him, however many decades younger she is, for being incoherent and making no sense. And he will have every opportunity to punch back. I mean, we could end up with the two of them saying, I don't know what the other person's talking about.
Okay, fair enough.
Which will be us sitting at home. Yes.
All right. So before we go on, let me just talk to you one more time about our friends at ExpressVPN. Did it yesterday. I went to a coffee shop. I pulled up my phone. I went on, used the Wi-Fi, and I had not booted up ExpressVPN, and I realized I hadn't, and I did so immediately again, so that my connection to the internet would be encrypted and no one could steal my data, no one could steal my information and sell it on the intellectual dark web. That's the promise and the guarantee of ExpressVPN. Every time you connect to such a network, your online data is not secured. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone. Your data is valuable, so stop hackers from stealing it by creating that secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. You fire up the app, as I did yesterday, click one button to get protected. It works on your phone, it works on your laptop, it works on a tablet, whatever, so you can stay secure on the go. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/commentary. That's expressvpn.com/commentary, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/commentary. A very interesting set of developments yesterday in the Middle East. A joint statement. Can you call something that's issued by three people a joint statement? Actually, I think joint really does refer to two things coming together, but a collective statement by the United States, Israel, and Qatar saying we are ready to have a meeting on August 15th to implement the framework of the ceasefire deal with Hamas in Qatar. Everybody get on a plane and come to Qatar, and we are going to make a deal. At the same time that this came out, or in the 24 hours previous, Israeli media started reporting that Yahya Sinwar, who is now not only the head of the war in Gaza, but the head of Hamas, altogether, congratulations to him, as Politico did in their transitions page, saying, Phil so-and-so just had his 63rd birthday. Joe so-and-so just got a new job at the Department of Commerce, and Yahya Sinwar is now the head of
I was
Hamas.
thinking of when I was the editor of a local Jewish newspaper early in my career, and we used to do the Mazel Tov page, and so-and-so's bar mitzvah, Yahya Sinwar's promotion.
Yeah, exactly.
And they have the office party, the Hamas office party, with the cake.
Yeah.
Congrats,
the little Dixie cups, cups of wine, little baklava. Anyway, but according to Channel 12 and Ehud Yaari of the Israeli journalist, and this is not a Bibi friendly or right wing broadcaster, basically said Sinwar is on his last legs. He desperately needs, his commanders want a ceasefire. They are they have been pounded into submission. It's time to make a deal. And of course, all the Israelis care about in this deal, there are two things, one of which is they obviously want some kind of recognition that Hamas is finished in some fashion. We don't know what that means. They want the hostages back. And presumably this announcement wasn't made by this triptych without some sense, because it is an issued statement saying this meeting is taking place next Thursday in Doha, and we will implement the framework. It's not like we're going to have a conversation. Now, things can happen. Hunter Biden can go into a courtroom and end up 6 months later a felon because he doesn't take the deal that was negotiated. And similarly, somehow Hamas could screw its interlocutors. But of course, this is happening at the same time that Israel is preparing, and the world seems to be preparing for a possible Iranian strike on Israel, or some kind of joint strike of Hamas and its 6 Catamite organizations against Israel. And that's what's interesting to me, which is they put a clock on this. It's a week. Either that gives Iran a week, or it's a sign that Iran is actually not moving, that Iran has let it be known that they're done, that they don't want to respond to Israel, and that in fact they want out of this particular, they're done with their client Hamas. Hamas is finished. They're not going to make things more complicated right now. John, and they want out.
But before we get to the Iran angle, I just want to say that the other interesting thing about this is that this shows that Israel was right, that the only way to get to something that looked anything like a deal, a surrender, or whatever, is to apply pressure, is to apply military pressure. And we've been talking about how they've sort of unleashed themselves against their enemy in these past weeks. And that's what's done it. And this could have been done months ago, right? Except for all the Biden administration's tying Israel's hands every chance it got.
Right. Look, that is a very significant fact. And we are going to have time to litigate this and sort of get the inside story and the backstory and all of that of what it was that led Israel to say 2.5 weeks ago, okay, we are shifting strategies. We are going at leaders. We are either we've developed the intelligence necessary to get them. We're going to go at the head of Hezbollah. We're going to go at Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas. We're going to go at the number 2 guy in Hamas in Gaza. We are going to go for this guy, that guy, the other guy. We're going to blow up the port in Yemen. We are doing things that we haven't done. Either we could have done them, but we refrained, or we have now developed enough information to know that the strategy that we were pursuing, which was a conventional military strategy to overwhelm, dominate, and take territory away from an enemy, now needs to be supplanted by decapitations of these enemy organizations and leave them brainless and running around like chickens with their heads cut off. How that happened?
Is it a different strategy, or is it just part of the same strategy? Also, a response to the attack on the children in the Druze village the other week. I agree. It seems like it's a change, but it's also the case that
it's a creative, right? It's additive. It's certainly not.
It's additive.
Our old strategy didn't work. Now we need a new strategy.
Because if anything, I think all of the intelligence that the IDF has gained from its intervention in the Gaza Strip may have helped locate some of these leaders. And of course, Mossad and it has extensive networks as well in Iran. I'm not that confident there will be an agreement next week. I think this is definitely a desperation play by the administration in order to prevent a large-scale conflict, and also to stop the offensive in Gaza, to give Harris some breathing room ahead of the election. Sinwar is a murderous, genocidal psychopath. And is Israel really going to give him what he wants? It's one thing to have these negotiations when Haniyeh is in Qatar, going to luxury restaurants under heavy security. But now he's out of the game, and this evil monster who lives in tunnels and in hiding and is, God knows how he's brutalizing the captives that he's spirited away from their homes and their lives. He's going to be the peacemaker. I just find that incredibly hard to believe.
Well, Abe gives you the answer, though. The answer is that he's not being a peacemaker. The answer is that this is a step toward Appomattox, that they are done for, and that they are trying to figure out what they have left, what arrows they have left.
Would he ever? I mean, I know that we're just speculating here, but this is the guy who holds up baby Palestinians and gives them their first AK-47s in front of cheering crowds. Would he ever accept defeat?
He wouldn't have to.
I'm skeptical.
Appomattox maybe was a terrible analogy. Forget Appomattox.
Okay.
Maybe he's Hitler in the bunker. And
Right.
what if Hitler in the bunker had one card left to play? Had one card, which he didn't. Would Hitler have played that card? I have no idea. Sinwar has a card. He has the hostages to play, and what I'm encouraged by, to the extent that I'm encouraged, if you can say this, is that people I trust, including our own contributing editor Jonathan Schanzer, looked at the order of battle and things that were happening yesterday and said, everybody seems now to be acknowledging that Hamas is on its last legs and are operating accordingly. In other words, there is a withdrawal of affect from the idea that say Qatar and Egypt need to be playing a hand on Hamas's side in some fashion or other, because the loss is upon them. Now, the loss may not be acknowledged. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's actually further than that. It's you take that thought all the way, which is that the reason we're close to a ceasefire agreement is because Iran does not want a regional war, and it does not want to have to keep upping the ante against Israel, because Israel is more capable than Iran is of winning each round of these, in this match. And I think that Iran sees an exit, that this is an exit lane for Iran, not for Sinwar. And right. I actually think that for the first time, you're actually seeing Iran lean on them and say, look, this is, I'm not having an all-out Middle East war with American, ships in the Mediterranean over, your ego, Sinwar. So we're going to sign a deal, and that's that. And he's just being instructed. And I think that that's very similar to the fact that, remember, a few days ago, there was this report that the Russians were saying, look, don't ignite a regional war, Iran. Like, we gave you this equipment. Don't get it blown up by the Israelis. Don't get it discovered, everything that we're giving you. And by the way, as we all know, when Russia gives other countries material, they tend to send Russians with them. It's very rare that they just send new missile launchers or missile defense that the other side didn't have before. You almost always send trainers and operators with them. And that's why Russians end up dying in various places all over the world. So the Russians said, oh, let's slow the roll to the Iranians. Right. And the Iranians said to their guy down the line, said, okay, we're going to slow the roll. And I think this is all Sinwar's hands.
This is all theory. But I mean, if you actually pull back and you think about where the Iranians got to after Hania was blown up in their version of the Blair House, it was, you've humiliated us, you've shamed us, you will not do this, we will destroy you, we are going to hit you hard, you are going to suffer. Then, you wait a little bit, and it's like, why are we going to threaten ourselves over the death of Ismail Hania? Obviously, it's really unnerving that Israel penetrated Tehran and blew somebody up in Tehran. And that, you can't just do that and not pay a price, I guess. But what if the only way for you to get them to pay a price is going to come back on you tenfold? You're not willing to empty your arsenal. About what? About a guy who came to a presidential inauguration visit, and so you looked bad for a while, versus Israel killing 20 leading figures in your government in pinpoint assassinations?
I'm just very leery of the idea of treating Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah as rational actors. I mean, we're always talking about the mirror image fallacy on this podcast, and we should not engage in the same thing. We don't know what's happening here. We do know that the administration is desperate to head off a regional war, is desperate to get a ceasefire, which they think will then relieve the pressure on the north, which they then think they could move toward the agreement with Saudi Arabia, which then would, again, relieve the pressure on the Democratic Party because of its pro-Hamas elements. That's why they've scheduled this conference. And Bibi has said that he's going to send representatives, but we don't know what's going to happen next week. We still don't know whether Iran, it would be in the culture of the Middle East for Iran to do nothing after the assassination of Haniyeh would be a total lack of faith.
I do not agree with you about this because here's why. Some of it goes to Abe's point, which is, so if there's no deterring these psychopaths, there's no deterring them. So why pursue a policy of trying to reestablish deterrence? But the reason that I think a policy of reestablishing deterrence works is that Iran, we hit Soleimani, and Iran said, we will rain fire and fury and destruction and terror and death on you. And it didn't really. And Israel has killed dozens of Iranian leaders, stole the Iranian nuclear, sort of the Pentagon Papers of Iran, has done stuff. And Iran has not responded in the way that conventionally one would have thought that Iran would respond, because it's scared of Israel and it doesn't know what the second strike is going to be. And this is why what happened in April after the Iranian 300 missile firing was pregnant with meaning. Because on the one hand, a lot of people I know think that, you know, Biden said take the win and Israel didn't respond as aggressively as it should. But Israel did respond. It blew up a radar station, and it did so using a weapon that Iran did not know, nor did anybody else practically on the planet know. I don't know what this weapon is. I don't know what it does. I don't understand these things. It has a weapon that was heretofore unknown that it used, and that the Iranians were evidently gobsmacked by. And so the idea is FAFO, like, you think that's the only thing we have to come at you if you fire on Tel Aviv? And they may be blinking, and they have blinked before. So, and, you know, like, a lot of their senior military leaders who, like, may be inventive and clever about this may not be around anymore. We don't even know. So that's all. I'm just saying, if you believe that, you know, wars have a geopolitical effect on restraining bad actors if they are successful, then that's what we could be seeing. You could be right, and this is like weird gaseous optimism. I don't think John Schanzer is a gaseous optimist. That's why I was so struck by his.
I'm not disagreeing with Schanzer's assessment of what's happening to Hamas in Gaza at all. It's
Iran you're talking.
That's what I'm hearing as well. I'm waiting to see how Iran responds to this slap in the face. And even if the April 13th attack, you know, the 300 missiles, all of them were intercepted, and there was just one casualty, the poor girl. And even if the response to the Soleimani killing back in 20 resulted in concussions for many of our servicemen, but no deaths, they do something. They're trying to kill Trump. We have a man in custody, a Pakistani man, who was trying to set up a hit on Trump, which is separate from the other public assassination attempt. So I don't think they've had a come to Allah moment. Let me put it that way.
But if you really consider, I mean, but first of all, by the way, I mean, I agree with Matt to the extent that like we don't know, and we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves here, and it's hard to imagine them just sort of stepping away. But if you think about it all, the situation that Iran is in is really bad. They have suffered. Their president went down in a helicopter. They're getting foreign terrorist heads blown up, pre-planned targeted killings on their soil. Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders are being taken out. They are this. If there is, and this is to say nothing of the unrest and the protests that they face. If there is a moment for them to say, you know what, this is not our time to go out. We don't know how porous our security apparatus is right now to begin with. Maybe anything we plan on doing, Israel will find out about beforehand anyway. They are not in the best position to be bold right now, at least if from their perspective.
I just want to say
also there's another data
right.
point.
Yeah,
there's another data point I want to put in here, which is that for the first time in the Maariv poll of the Israeli government, of the Israeli public toward their government, for the first time since spring of 2023, Bibi Netanyahu is chosen over Benny Gantz or anybody else as the public's best choice for prime minister. And his party, Likud, is at its strongest point in the polls today that it has been since October 7th. That again, Bibi's personal slide in the polls happened before October 7th, just because he's been in office so long. So that's the other part here, which is that, there's the Israeli part here, which is, they are in a feedback loop as well. And the feedback that they're getting is, this is good. This is, we are actually accomplishing, getting things done, as Democrats like to say, with a switch of words there. But this is an actual accomplishment. We've taken out these guys. The public reacts. There's no way around the fact that we have won recent rounds of this tit for tat.
Right.
There's no way to score this any other way for scoring a boxing match. There's no way to say, well, Haniyeh is maybe equal to, I don't know, a drone in Tel Aviv or something like that. So I think that everybody is just recognizing that Israel is stronger at this moment than they may have given it credit for. The government may have a better plan and may be better prepared and maybe knows what it's doing more so than they've felt at any moment since October, when even on this podcast, we've said, it's not clear to me, but not clear to us what Bibi's roadmap here is that he's following.
Right. Okay. So this is a very important point. I want to, people who are listening to me know, or a lot of people know, that my sister, Ruthie Bloom, is a prominent Israeli journalist. She has a really wonderful podcast. We'll make this the commentary recommends. Her podcast, Israel Undiplomatic, which you can get at jns.org or subscribe to, with the ambassador, Mark Regev, who has been a veteran Israeli diplomat. And she is the id and he is the ego on the podcast. And my sister Ruthie says two things. One is, everybody was very unnerved about the threat from Iran, and people went out and they bought canned food and they bought tuna and they did this and they did that. And she said the joke in Israel now is that after like a week of this, people started eating up the food that they had put away, and now they're like saying to each other, do I have to go back to the supermarket and get more tuna? Like, where are the Iranians? Her view is that Israel should hit Iran preemptively. Iran has threatened Israel. That this is a foolishness on Bibi's part, because they should not stop and wait to see what happens and then have to respond afterward. Take the threat. Iran's been at war with Israel since October 7th. Hamas is a Iranian proxy. Hezbollah is Iran. The Houthis are Iran. They're just arms of the Iranian military force. And so don't stop. It's the same war. Hitting Iran is no different from blowing up something in Khan Yunis. That's her view. And at the same time, she is like, I don't know. I mean, everybody's kind of we're worried like Hezbollah can hit Tel Aviv or something, but we're still eating. You know what? We're gonna if we need it, we're gonna go into our cache of food we're supposed to store and eat the tuna. And that is the Israeli character, because one of the things that we have to remember is they're not us. This is Matt's like the mirror fallacy. It's a country that's been at war for 80 years. Every single person in the country has family members in the military, had been in the military themselves, has faced war. There was a kind of pause in actual sort of combat war in a large sense from 2006 to 2023, although there were moments when troops went into Gaza in 2014. But like everybody has been, this is a country, and they have rockets flying at them, and they go into the stairwell when there's an air raid siren. Like this is an intensification. The Iranian threat is an intensification of the same threat that they've always faced. October 7th was the new thing. That was an invasion of the country at its soft underbelly that led to the death of thousands of civilians and the injuries of thousands of people, and people running amok over the south of Israel for 3 days until they were eliminated. Like that was new, and that has changed the entire country's psychology and understanding of itself, but not the threat from Iran. Israel came to being with 22 Arab countries or 21 Arab countries trying to destroy it. And this has always been the kind of, this is the overarching fact of Israeli existence. And so, Matt, if they're feeling a little, maybe optimistic isn't the right word, but if they're feeling like they're less scared of Iran than they were a week ago, I don't know why I can't feel a little less scared on their behalf of Iran than I was feeling a week ago.
You can.
Okay, thank you.
I'm giving you permission.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'm giving you permission. You gave me permission yesterday to be angry that Harris is running for president. So I'm giving you permission to feel a little bit more confident. And I think there's something to what you're saying. I think the longer Iran waits, the more likely it is the attack does not look quite like what many people feared just a week ago might happen. But then we still don't know. And we also don't know what Hezbollah is going to do either. Because even now, as people are reporting that perhaps the threat from Iran directly is lessened somewhat, there is still Hezbollah, which is out there and could operate independently or could operate as kind of a proxy for an Iranian reprisal.
Right. It's just the situation is a lot more ambiguous than it was 4 or 5 days ago. And the idea that, Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States are going to be in Qatar to deliver terms collectively in some fashion or other to Hamas next Thursday. Well, maybe it's a Hail Mary play. I don't know. I don't trust them.
Qatar at all. I don't trust Egypt at all. And I barely trust the United States government at all on this question. Right. So I'm just very skeptical. And I hope that Netanyahu's commitment to what seems like victory through the different attacks in the previous weeks and through the kind of the running up, the deconstruction of the terrorist infrastructure in Gaza continues until the job is done and Hamas truly is defeated, which it looks like could be in another month if the idea continues to prosecute the case.
Okay, well, on that unexpectedly high note of not a hope, I don't know, whatever, or expectation, we are going to begin our break with special podcasts next week, as I said, through Thursday. And the recommendation again of Israel Undiplomatic, the podcast from the Jewish News Syndicate, co-hosted by my sister Ruthie Bloom and Ambassador Mark Regev. Give it a shot. It's pretty fantastic. And we will be back with you at the end of next week. So for Abe, Matt, and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.